Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
Well, hi guys, this is John from Passion Nerdly for Tome Travelers, and today I am actually at Dallas's Dreamhack, and surprise, surprise, I actually ran into someone on the floor from Crafty Games, which we just did our two interviews, one with Patrick Capera, and we also did our talk with Ed Healy, and so now I've got the opportunity to talk to. So Alex, thank you so much for taking the moment, just out of the con schedule for this a second, to go ahead and talk to me. I know it's Friday, so it's kind of one of those days where people are going to trickle in. Yeah. But, so I was kind of really excited because we got to talking about Mistborn a little bit. We both have the RPG and the tabletop game. We think both of them are absolutely brilliant. And you start talking about Spycraft, the next iteration. And so it's one of those things where, I was excited to have an opportunity to just talk to you about that.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's been a long, strange road with Spycraft. I mean, the third edition, I'm not sure how much Patrick had told you previously about it, but we've been working on and off for the better part of like 8 years. It's one of those things you pick up, work on. It's not quite what we want. Either probably in the third or fourth do-over on stuff. But that was mainly just because we've sort of developed and grown as designers working on it. And so I feel like it's in a pretty good spot right now. It's not one of those things I'm actively working on at the moment. I don't want to get everybody's hopes up.
Oh yeah,
But it's definitely on the radar, I think, more so than it has been in the last couple of years, as we're kind of coming through the wilderness of a bunch of other things. And so it's it's been interesting to work on something for this long, just because you're constantly growing and changing as a designer and learning a lot from the other things you do. I mean, I'm learning stuff about what I want out of Spycraft from working on board games and working on other RPGs, and observing how the audience changes and stuff like that, and what the expectations are and stuff like that. And so, I feel like I have a pretty crystallized vision of how I want it to work. I think it's going to kind of meet people where they are. As I was describing earlier before we started talking on the mic, I think I want to make this edition of Spycraft to be what people always expected Spycraft to be. I think those of us who have a great affection for Spycraft, whether it's first edition or 2.0, we have a vision in our minds of what Spycraft was. It was Bond, it was Mission Impossible, it was it was Spooks, it was whatever, or MI5. It was all these big properties. I never really felt, in retrospect especially, that it delivered quite on where we wanted to be. Like, it wasn't that out of the box. I think the players had to bring a lot to the table. And we have all this great, spy cinema and spy fiction out there that inspires us. But it's like, how do we really bring that to the table? And so I know that you're saying that Pat had said, well, it won't even necessarily be a D20 game. I think we're trying to hit this sweet spot in the middle of everything, where it's not, if it's not D20, that means we're not going to adhere. There's not going to be an orthodoxy. But there are certain things that also will be familiar. So, the D20's in there. The things the first thing we asked people was like, what do you really like about Spycraft? I said, well, action dice, of course.
Oh yeah. No.
And so, I mean, that is the new heart of the game. Like, the 20-sided die is there. Skill checks are there. The things that you expect and the things you liked about first edition and second edition, I think, are really there and crystallize in a lot of ways. It's like a tincture of what we want. But then it's also trying to enable the types of stories you wanted from the previous editions, but maybe, the kind of Swiss clock nature of 2.0. Like, how do we make the game a little more freewheeling than that? Where people feel like they have room to move and to adapt on the fly without potentially breaking something else. Or, from first edition, how do we maybe get over a little bit of the gun fondlingness, and give people the right amount of stuff where they're not buried in it, and they're not thinking about stats or buried under a heap of classes, but they feel like they have a lot of flexibility to be the cool spy. Like you don't have this giant skill list that you're like, well, do you have use rope? Oh, well, sorry, you can't get out of your bonds. Like none of that. Yeah. So we're trying to avoid all these things because you want the characters to feel larger than life, able to achieve, even if they don't have the thing. They haven't planned everything exactly out, because there was such a desire or a temptation in D20 to like map out a character's life from the beginning, and I think that's sort of antithetical to spy stories, where you got more of jacks of all trades and people who are doing really interesting, daring things and willing to take risks. And I think that's the type of stuff we really want to enable in the system and reward in the system. Like, planning is good. You will be pat on the head, and you will be much better if you plan for something. But you're not going to be punished for not having planned for something. I think that's like one of the great things I've learned from board game development and design is not punishing people for having not made a particular choice. Like it may be harder to win, but that doesn't mean I actually like swat you across the nose and say, no, you needed this feat,
Now, will we see any kind of like system tie-ins between Mistborn and Spycraft, or, with the new one coming out, or are you going to kind of stick more with the feel and the mechanics of the old one?
I think so. No, we're not going to tie it mechanically to Mistborn, but I have learned a lot about making a stronger role-playing game from making Mistborn, and the easiest way to say that is to express it, I guess, is that I've learned a lot more about trusting players, and that sum up getting the right level of distraction to enable without locking people down. It's about finding this. It's all about this balancing act because you want a certain level of texture and detail in your spy stories. Mistborn is a very storytelling-oriented system. It's very freewheeling, and that's not what Spycraft needs. You want to feel that you're different. If you've been trained by MI5 versus having been sprung from prison and then brought into a shadowy assassination thing, you want those characters to feel like they're coming from different backgrounds and that matters in some way to how they function on the table. That's part of what makes them cool. And niche protection is much more important in a game like Spycraft, because you want the Mission Impossible thing. Like, you have the guy who's the technician, the technical expert. You got the guy who's the expert on leadership or disguise. You have the guy who's the pilot. While you want people to be able to specialize in that way, and Mistborn is much more broad than that. But I think learning from Mistborn how to enable story through mechanics in kind of novel ways, and to use a limited set of tools to create broader play experiences, I think has been really critical. So, action dice, I mentioned action dice are like the heart of the new system. And so now action dice are, one, they can be used a lot more broadly. They come back a lot more. They're more common. But they lead to these things called escalation. So as players blow through it, they're actually increasing the tension of the story internally. Okay. And so you're going to have this ramping up element, which is driven by the players. And that's something like allowing the players to control the tempo is one of those things I learned from working on Mistborn, like letting them tell you through their actions how they want the game to go, and to actually have that mechanically reflect in the game is, I think, a really strong choice, because it lets people effectively up the ante, or maybe unintentionally up the ante, where you have the ever-increasing stakes of a spy story, where it's like, how much crazier could it get? Now the roof's on fire. Now they're on a space shuttle. It doesn't have to be totally gonzo, but you have that sort of that element of action movie scenes where it's just like, what else could go wrong? And that is a classic thing. And so we've got this sort of like narrative. It's all tied to this core narrative swing system that sits inside the game, and now allows a lot more improvisation and a lot more at usually the most inconvenient times, and allows players to kind of like bid over each other in a sense to cause these swings, and to and there's a lot more like there's like social elements like bribing people, like the GM can like push people with like bad action dice, which you want to still work as well as any others, but then cause kind of like corrupt the pool and make things maybe go their way later. So there's a lot of there's a ton of social play around that just that idea of this pot and these things and how you contribute and all these rules that hook into it that don't increase the complexity of the game, but add this whole new social and tension layer that exists in the table space without any extra rules, right? Because people are going to like mentally game that and look at it and always be checking it and we kind of embrace the metagame, stuff like that really helps, I think, actually adds to the game without making it more complex.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, other questions I just really want to ask, I mean, Mistborn is a wonderful RPG. I love the book. I love the way it's designed, and when I got it in the mail, I just thought it was, I was like, what? It's like, it goes on my shelf next to the other ones. And so are we going to expect any more from the Mistborn series? I know that you guys have a line of dice coming.
Right. So we actually have a few more things coming for the RPG. So the next book is going to be called Nobles, the Golden Mandate. And so it actually is about the nobility, noble society, a lot of it does a deeper dive into like the great houses, which we started with the Mistborn House War game. We created characters around that sphere. I got to play in the sandbox a little bit and create new characters, and I actually had biographies I wrote for them and stuff. And that stuff helped build out part of this book. There's also a big adventure in there, like there have been in our other cultural supplements. So that's really good. And so that should be coming out, I don't know, later this year is the plan.
Nice.
Currently. It's in very late stages of development right now. We just got to go into editing and last bits of writing. Then we do have some dice products coming up soon. One that's very exciting, which will be dropping this summer, is the Mistborn Metal Dice.
And from what I understand, each dice is the element of the different magics, and in theory, it looks like it.
Yeah, sorry people, there's no gold dice.
Yeah, that's something.
But yeah, it's a complete set of Allomancy, all 20 dice, all with unique look and feel. So it's like a combination of finish and plating. We've actually seen some of the early prototypes. They're spectacular. Actually, have some 3D prototypes here I can show you, but they're great. The company we work for has done a great job, and so that should be coming out in the next couple months. We're just going through approvals right now, and that's going to be very exciting. And that campaign will be a lot of fun too, because it's got a lot of fun stuff planned with stretch goals and stuff that people will be surprised by.
Oh yeah, no, we'll be hopping on that one.
Yeah.
And just for my listeners, yes, this is the Mistborn that is by Brandon Sorensen. It does have an RPG. Sanderson. You know, I'm horrible with names. My listeners do know that. But this is also, Mistborn. It's the book series. He also is teaming up with two other tabletop figures right now, Colin Kelly and, oh goodness, I can't remember the other one's name, but they're both from Vast, and they're from Champions of the Earth, which is also RPG podcasting. So, he's teaming up with them for a comic book, I believe.
Oh, cool.
So, same guy. You definitely need to get out to Crafty Games and check out that one. And so, other than that, you're here, though, at Dreamhack for a tabletop game.
Yes.
Y'all are demoing something.
Sure, yeah. So we are talking about our game that will be coming on our following Kickstarter. It's called Tabriz, Tabriz. It's by a new designer named Randy Flynn. It's a wonderful little Euro game that's sort of in the vein of a game like Istanbul or Century Spice Road, where you are carpet merchants in the Silk Road era, running around the market trying to collect the materials you need to market and sell your carpets to increasing levels of nobility throughout this. So it's a fantastic little Euro, plays in about 45 minutes to an hour. A lot of fun, and that'll be coming, I don't know, sometime after the dice. We're still sorting out exact schedule.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the interview, and, guys, be sure, are y'all going to be doing any other, I know you got Gen Con coming up. Y'all are going to be there for that. Yes. So are there any other conventions y'all are going to?
After Gen Con, our next convention will be PAX Unplugged in Philly.
Oh, excellent.
At the beginning of December.
That is a fun con.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, thank you, guys, and be sure to check it out. Bye.
Thank you.
Passion Nerdly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.